The journey to Cape Verde from Ascension Island meant crossing the equator. The crew of the Voyager treated us to the delights of the ancient ceremony of crossing the line. Not that there were any delights. The ceremony is presided over by King Neptune, but this one looked more like the king of the fairies. He couldn't even make a trident, and carried what looked more like a curtain pole. And once Neptune's lovely wife had arrived, supposed victims are found who'd never crossed the equator before, and they're subjected to various humiliations. Here, the victim is supposedly sawn in half, covered in spaghetti and tomato sauce to represent blood and guts. Although some sort of narration or dialogue was going on, from our position looking down from the top deck, we couldn't hear a thing. All we saw was that the victim then had to jump into the pool to clean off. Then it was time for victim number 2 to go through the process, except this time her head was sawn off and then thrown into the pool. The third victim received even more spaghetti, sauce, sausages, and a lot of custard, cleaned up, and then everyone, including the captain and senior officers, all jumped into the pool. God knows why. It wasn't funny, not even amusing, and we wondered why we'd wasted our time watching it. It took 3 days to sail north to Cape Verde, during which we encountered some beautiful sunshine, but huge swells, which meant the boat was thrown around rather a lot. On one day, Hazel took to her bed and stayed there. There are 10 islands making up the country of Cape Verde. They were discovered and colonised by the Portuguese in the 15th century, only gaining their independence in 1975. And we've stopped at Mindelo, the capital of the island of Sao Vicente. Our first stop was at the National Handicraft Museum, an interesting old house with a central courtyard containing very little. This is a statue of Diego Afonso, the Portuguese navigator who discovered the islands, and he's just a few yards away from the bustling fish market. In a central square, which was mainly empty, a few stalls sold fruit and veg, and even furniture. But perhaps we needed to be there on market day to see it at its best. We were taken by coach to see the island from a few vantage points, and could plainly see that Sao Vicente is an arid, barren place, much like other volcanic islands in the Atlantic. They sit on the mid-Atlantic ridge, the meeting place of 2 of the Earth's tectonic plates. Apart from the islands, the ridge is underwater, so we don't see much of what is the longest mountain range in the world. Back down at sea level, this is Baía das Gatas, once a remote fishing village. But now, every August, a huge pop music festival is held there, attracting thousands, mainly living in tents. But this is going to be valuable land one day. Already a few hotels, restaurants and apartments are being built around the huge lagoon, which forms a natural swimming pool. And it has the look of what one day may become a very popular resort. Back in Mindelo, at the water's edge, there's a tower. It's a smaller replica of Lisbon's Belém Tower, and perhaps a reminder of home for the colonists. Its restoration was finished in 2009, and it now houses a museum. We stopped for a break at a place where we were all herded in for some not very appetizing food and drink, and some local youths took the opportunity to try and earn some money. By this time we were getting a bit fed up with being taken around in a pack and left the group to do our own thing. We found a smart restaurant right on the water for a spot of lunch. Suitably refreshed, and no, we didn't have lobster, we investigated the tower. Inside was a marine exhibition which was rather dull, apart from a large, real but very dead squid. To get to the top of the tower was precarious to say the least, and for the last part involved a vertical and shaky metal ladder going up the outside. But it was worth it for the views. A quick visit to the market, and we were able to buy some small presents for the grandchildren. Then it was back to the port to prepare for sailing at 6 p.m. We had 2 days at sea before we reached Gran Canaria. On one of them the sea became very rough again. Hazel stayed in her cabin and was only persuaded to come out when we told her we were opening a bottle of champagne in the bar. And here we are, David's 80th birthday, and we're on familiar ground. One of the many things that helped us to decide on this cruise was that we'd be at Gran Canaria for David's birthday, and also the fact that there on holiday were Danny and Tony. Now, having been to GC dozens of times before, we knew exactly where to go for a great lunch. We booked the table last October when we were there, and once the ship had arrived at Las Palmas, we took a taxi down to meet Danny and Tony at Maspalomas.
Bien brillante
Although we'd been to Las Rias many times, it was the first time we'd been there for lunch, and they certainly did us proud. A table at the front overlooking the promenade and the sea, and a special arrangement of flowers to decorate it.
Oh, really?
It was only by chance that we...
Yeah, that was the day she became a teenager.
That's right.
13.
She's lovely though, isn't she?
Yes. Those days of the shark attack. Well, that must be 10 years ago. When
We were all talking and looking elsewhere when later the waiters crept up and burst into song with Happy Birthday. So sadly that's not on film. And they brought with them a huge tiramisu.
it must be coffee, I think. You've got coffee beans on there.
The next day we arrived at Tenerife. Unfortunately, Hazel's holiday was finishing here. We set off to explore the capital, Santa Cruz, while she waited on board Voyager before going to the airport to catch her flight home. It's carnival here in Tenerife, and preparations are being made for the parade later, and even the little ones are joining in.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All of you are welcome to this island, Tenerife, the most beautiful island of the whole Canary archipelago. Of course, I was born here. Yeah. Right.
On day 2 of our visit to Tenerife, we set off at 8 a.m. to go on a coach trip to take us to Mount Teide. Once we'd gone through the outskirts of the capital, the mountain road goes up nearly 2,300 metres, taking us into the cloud layer and then above it into the bright sunshine. The previous day, people on this trip were unlucky. The coach couldn't get to the mountain because the road was blocked by snow, and the remains of it were all around us. Mount Teide itself reaches 3,718 metres. That's just over 12,000 feet. It's the highest point above sea level in the islands of the Atlantic. It's volcanic, of course, and it last erupted in 1909. As we turned this corner, we could see perfectly how layer upon layer from past eruptions had been pushed up and twisted by later ones. And it's a perfect spot for many observatories with the clarity of the air here. Our biggest surprise came when we reached our destination. The lunar landscape was spectacular. We were inside a vast volcanic crater about 30 miles in circumference. It's so bleak here with its rugged volcanic cliffs and solidified lava flows that once poured across the crater that it was used to film scenes for Planet of the Apes.
For the moon I see the river moon, and you've got it. Match the finest words to the greatest tune, and you bought it. Crossing star, walk the longest mile in a minute. Where do drifters go? Wonder if they know there's no limit. Say you're sorry. Make me dream at night, break my heart inside, don't you worry. Swept the sounds of love from the skies above, and I knew it. Swim the seas of blue just to drown in you, and I blew it. Hear it, the shiver in spine, don't come near it. I love it, it's orange, you cry, rise above it.
On the way back to Santa Cruz, we stopped to walk through the town of La Orotava and to the House of Balconies, a lovely traditional Spanish house, now aimed solely at removing some money from visiting tourists. When we walked back a different way, we didn't realise that the lane was running along the side of a church until we heard the music. Lunch had been booked for all of us in a hotel overlooking the town. To start with, we had to wait about half an hour because they weren't ready for us. And as you can probably tell by the look on my face, the meal was awful.
The shiver and spine don't come near it. I love it. You saw and you cry, rise above it.
The plan then was to have an hour or so to ourselves down in the resort, but that couldn't happen because nearly all the roads were closed by now for Carnival. Didn't Voyagers of Discovery know that would happen? They don't seem to do their homework properly. Instead, we were dropped off at a viewpoint where we could look down and see some of the floats being prepared for the parade. Our final visit in the Canaries was to La Palma. We were only there for the morning, so we had another early start. Again, our drive took us out of the city, also called Santa Cruz, and up through the mountains, sometimes quite literally. Our destination was the rim of a magnificent caldera. The views from there are amazing, so we're told. Today, a large cushion of cloud filled the lower part of the crater and blocked the view. I'm sure the driver knew exactly what he was doing, but we did seem very close to the edge at times on the way back. The rest of the trip wasn't really up to much. The rather dull visitor centre provided a much-needed toilet stop for all the elderly passengers, one of whom kept annoying the guide by asking moronic questions like, "Is the driver wearing sunglasses because he had a late night?" No, it's sunny.
Las islas voy formando con agua espuma. Con agua espuma cubriendo los barrancos.
We had lunch back on the ship as we were leaving La Palma at 1 p.m. And tomorrow there's a much more interesting day in store when we reach Funchal on the island of Madeira.
Con hilos misteriosos me se la